Welcome everyone to the webinar. We'll be getting started in just another minute. Welcome everyone to the webinar. Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We are just getting started here and okay, I'm just checking out all of our controls. So welcome to the Saturn Transit webinar hosted by Pillai Center. We wanted to host this free webinar to help everyone understand this big transit that's happening this week. You might have heard some buzz around Astrovet or Pillai Center or other places on the web that Saturn is transiting. And it's like, well, what does that mean? And what does that mean for my life? And what do I need to do about it? Because it sounds ominous, right? We've heard maybe that Saturn has gives hard lessons, or maybe we've heard that Saturn is such a tough planet, or Saturn is the agent of karma. We've heard these things that may sound scary and tough and dark, but we want to shed light today on what it all means, break it down, how Saturn impacts your life, how this transit can impact your life. What is this transit all about? And the significance here is that Saturn is the slowest moving planet. So he's moving very slowly. And so he'll be in his location for about 2.5 years, which again, kind of makes it scary. It's not like he's moving quickly. If you had something that was hard to happen, it's over in a month, like the sun moves. But so we're in it for a long time. So let's understand what this means and how we can use this time most to help ourselves the most over the next 2.5 years. So I have with me two amazing human beings that I love, who are also Pillai Center teachers. Donatella Lalita is a Pillai Center teacher, as well as a Vedic astrologer, an astrologer for Astrovet. Mina Malloy is a Pillai Center teacher and a coach for Pillai Center. Oops, turn my watch off. And they're here to share their knowledge with us today. So we're going to start out with Lalita. Let me just make sure you're unmuted. Can you unmute yourself? Okay.
Yes.
There we go. Great. I want to start out with Lalita and ask, really, who is Saturn? What we've heard kind of these things about Saturn, these scary things about Saturn. Shed some light on why he's such a significant planet.
Yes, sure. First of all, every planet gets a mixed review, and Saturn gets only a bad review, but it's inaccurate. It's important to reassure people that Saturn is really not the scariest planet ever. He is, however, a very strict planet, and he takes over our consciousness in incredible ways, because he becomes the boss, so to speak, in the house where he's placed in our birth chart and in our lives. So the first house, so the place where it is, if to give an example, if it's the first house, that's the physical body, it's your path in life, and it influences also your relationships from there. So it takes over several houses from the moment he arrives in a house. And in a rare book by Brigu, it is said that also the second house, from where Saturn is, and the fourth house become influenced by Saturn very, very significantly. So we have kind of like from 7 to 9 houses, if we consider also the astrological signs of Saturn, which are Capricorn and Aquarius. So you need to stop and take care of Saturn, basically, and then Saturn will bless you and will help you to achieve a lot. And I have a ticket.
And that's what Dr. Pillai has mentioned too, that Saturn can basically make or break you. And once we kind of have this blessing of Saturn, it is immense. It is immense. And so Mina, I'll turn over to you. What do you have to say about who Saturn is and his significance?
Well, I've had a lot of experience with Saturn. I just finished a really 19 years of a Saturn dasa. And prior to that, I was in my Sadhisate. And at the end of the Saturn dasa, the major planetary period, I've been in 8th house Saturn. So those are all indicators of strong Saturn influence. And I can only say I am immensely grateful for the lessons that Saturn has taught. They have been difficult. I wouldn't sugarcoat that. When Saturn comes into your life, the best thing to do is to understand that it is Saturn and not to take it so personally, and to know that Saturn really wants you to come to your soul. That is the greatest gift of Saturn. And we can be distracted by everything in life, but Saturn will take those distractions away and let you know what's real, what's important. And that has been his gift to me. So that's why I said I'm immensely grateful. Though I went kicking and screaming at times for the lessons. And I just want to share one real quick story. Before our webinar today, a friend showed me a friend who has an exalted Saturn, who worships Saturn religiously, gives sesame oil every Saturday, does anything possible to propitiate Saturn, supports the elderly in the Tripura program. I mean, just goes overboard. But over and over again, Dr. Pillai has said, watch out, Saturn wants to hurt you. You know, I mean, and that was always a shock to me because it's an exalted Saturn. Today, when he did his regular ritual and offering to Saturn of the sesame oil, he came back and the picture of Saturn was burned completely. He does this, he's been doing this for years. And today this happened. Saturn blessed him and said, okay, I won't hurt you. You're free. And the blessings now are full. So he has done the propitiation. And Saturn was very clear. He gave him his message. So anyways, I thought it was so interesting. I said, you're showing me this miracle on the day of this webinar, which is really cool.
Thank you so much. And that really, that Saturn wants to bring you back to your soul, and how great, how blessed we are for that. And I have examples that I've heard through lots of folks and family members too, of like how Saturn can impact you. So the next thing we're going to talk about is really, how do you know, right? How do you know if Saturn is impacting you negatively or positively? And that's through your experiences. So we're going to talk a bit about that. We're not yet, folks, getting into like where he is in your chart and things like that, but more in general, how would you know? So I'll give an example of my brother, who went through 19 years of Saturn and then went through 7 years, just like Mina did. And in that time, he went to jail. He got a crippling issue with his disc that left his body. He started limping, couldn't use his whole, basically the right side of his body. So there's this like crippled aspect of it. And I understand Saturn is often depicted as a crippled person, and you guys can confirm that. Just kind of like the black cloud situation, like things just continue to go wrong. And so that's where I watched this occur for someone in my life who's not spiritual, or not, I shouldn't say not spiritual, but not paying attention to like doing remedies and things of that nature, where it's unfolding for him. We have the blessings of knowing what type of remedies we can do, just like Mina said, so we can start shifting that around. So let's turn it over to Lalita. Help us understand, what are kind of the traits, that the telltale signs that we would see in our lives if when Saturn is impacting us in a negative way and in a positive way?
Right, so it's important to remember the positive way, because definitely Saturn rules the elderly, he rules the poor, he rules thieves, he rules the disabled, and so the most unfortunate people in the world, including thieves. I don't think they're very happy people. Mm-hmm. So Saturn rules a lot of sadness in our lives. but it is meant to mature us. It would be the example of somebody who goes to jail because he has done something wrong, and he will learn from that experience and never do it again for this life and the future lives. So that's a dramatic example that you use, and it makes so much sense because Saturn is lame himself, is the sun's son. He was born from the sun and his shadow wife, a surrogate mother of Saturn. Actually, a surrogate wife of the sun. So he is lame, and he rules that possibility that our limbs will be affected. Also, the Jataka Parijata, which is a book written by a sage, said that Saturn has stiff limbs. So it's like that rigid person, older person who gets up from a chair and is sore. So definitely older age, and we need to take care of that. But Saturn entering Capricorn becomes an incredible, powerful force in our lives. So while we will need to do remedies, all of us, no exceptions, including an exalted Saturn. Somebody with exalted Saturn will suffer in certain areas of life. Saturn influences everything in your chart, I can say 90%, like any other planet. So we need to be very, very careful. But the wisdom.
Talk a little bit more about that. Why is Saturn impacting 90% of our chart when other planets aren't?
So let's suppose somebody has the moon in Taurus or in Aries, and then maybe the sun, all the planets are spread around, and don't involve Capricorn and Aquarius. So Saturn will look straight at the 7th house, so the opposite house from where he is. He also influences the position from where he is, also the 3rd house from where he is, and the 10th house from there, which is the, like it's the Karaka, the representative of the career. So all those houses, but according to Brigu, who is the greatest Maharishi who wrote about Vedic astrology, also the 2nd house from where Saturn is, so also the 4th from where he is, and then add Capricorn ruled by Saturn and Aquarius ruled by Saturn. I mean, this is 9 houses, right?
I see.
So
okay.
If you think that's very little left, it's only 3 houses left. So
Right.
I think that's 90% or maybe less.
That's cool. No, I didn't know that. I didn't realize he had all the impacts on the particular houses from where he is.
It has a lot of power, and is also the slowest planet. So when it starts hitting a house, a placement in your chart, you'll know it because it won't change overnight. So the planets remain in each sign for a certain amount of time, and Saturn remains for 2.5 years, sometimes 3 years, because we have to count to the retrograde period. So in this case, almost 3 years. But that is a great blessing for humanity because Capricorn is a sign of wisdom and achievement and seriousness, a very practical sign. So there is that Vaishya energy. Vaishya means a merchant. So also business can improve, and career, depending on where it's placed in your chart. But in general, it gives that kind of energy to everyone. Mm-hmm. And for some people, maybe Capricorn is their children or another area of life. But in general, Capricorn means that achievement, rising to the top of a corporation, because it requires hard work and humility, and also generosity of character, and an attitude, toward an inclination towards respecting your authority figures rather than antagonizing them. So that's intelligence. So Saturn there teaches us to do those things that will bring good things and stability and security, which we need for the 200% life.
Right. Thank you. Mina, what about you? What do you have to say in regards to kind of the signs that Saturn is having impact, since you have so much experience in that area?
I'm sorry, can you expound on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so for the folks out there, they don't know anything about astrology. They want to know, how do I know if Saturn is having an impact on me? I gave the example of my brother where even if you don't look at his chart, just by what's going on externally, you can see that there's a Saturn impact. So what other qualities of Saturn would you say that we could recognize kind of to indicate, oh, that means that's Saturn?
Okay. I would look first for the signs of where there's either restriction, because when Saturn restricts, it also, um, it has a, how would I say, it's a lot of delays. So for instance, I was coming here on the webinar today and I gave plenty of time. I was going out um, beforehand and I had plenty of time to get back. There were so many delays with the traffic and everything like that. And the people I was with said, well, what would you expect? It's Saturn. Of course, we're going to have delays. Whenever I see delays, I'll look and I'll say, is this a Saturn hora? Or for instance, when Saturn went into my 7th house, all of these difficulties actually showed up around relationships. And at first I was taking it again very personally, but then when I realized, oh, this is Saturn, and I thought, what is Saturn trying to teach me here? It became a much deeper experience and a much better experience. I looked at my part, I took full responsibility because I knew Saturn wanted to teach me. So wherever there seems to be difficulties in the life or delays, I would say that's a great sign that Saturn is having an impact.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you.
Or in walking, as Lolita was saying, and as your brother experienced during my Saturn period, I had great difficulties. It all showed up with the knees. And as I left my major planetary, all of that pain started to be released overnight, not even associated with any kind of therapy. It just released. So I knew, okay, Saturn is starting to give me relief.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
So it can be in the body, it can be in all areas. As Lolita so rightly said, he has impact in every area of our life. And we just need to see how it is, where our restrictions are. We can pretty much know that that's where he's hitting us. And I think that's really helpful when you go to an astrologer to say, I know it might not be the direct hit, but Saturn, I'm definitely having these restrictions in this area. And they will look deeper and then they may see the angle and how it's actually having an impact.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another indicator that I've just witnessed too from people is loss. I have a friend who lost her mother, her dog that she was very attached to, lost her marriage, children moved out, she basically lost her home. Like she just had a lot of loss. And that was how Saturn showed up for her inside of the 7 years of Saturn. So, so some indicators people of kind of when Saturn shows up, what it looks like. Now don't worry, we're going to give you a whole list of things that you can do for remedies and at the end, stuff you can do freely at home. So just stay tuned and we'll get to that. So if you're, again, we don't want to instill fear. But we want to educate. Like what I love about Dr. Ply's teachings and how he encourages the understanding astrology is it's like a roadmap. So here we are, this is our life. We have our current karma, our current situations. Now, what might happen over the next 2.5 years, 3 years, 6 months, what have you, in regards to where planets may be moving in our chart. And that gives us an indicator to say like, oh, these type of things may become challenging. However, these type of things can put us on a super highway. We can go faster, like the fast lane. So we're either in the slow lane on, let's say, relationships, if your Saturn's in your 7th house, or you're in the fast lane if Saturn's somewhere supporting your career in this regards. So on that note, we're going to learn a little bit more about what exactly a transit is. We're all born at a certain time in certain location on the earth. And during that time when you literally come out of your mother into the world, their planets are in a certain place, and that makes an impact on you, an imprint, and that is called your birth chart. And at that time, in that moment of time when you enter the world for the first time, that blueprint is placed upon you in terms of a karmic blueprint of like how things may go for you. And Dr. Pillai wants us to make sure we take seriously astrology. Not that things can't be changed, because they can. That's what remedies are for. However, knowing what that blueprint is helps us to manage our life going forward. What we're good at, what we're not good at, what we are going to have challenges, what we're not going to have challenges in. So then now the planets aren't stopped in time after you're born, they're continuing to move. And that's what transits are called. So I'd like to understand, and hopefully you two at home would like to understand a bit more about how that works. So Lalita, if you would help us understand more about transits and how they impact us.
Okay, so we know that the planets are constantly moving and they move forward, even though sometimes they seem to be retrograde. They don't go retrograde. It's like driving a car. Sorry about my cough drops. So you were driving a car and we see the pedestrians on the side of the road walking backward. So obviously they aren't. So similarly, the planets are constantly moving and they change constellations. So that's why I want to take a minute to talk about Saturn, how it's going to act differently throughout this transit in Capricorn, because Capricorn is not all the same. It depends on the constellations. And it's so important to remember that Vedic astrology is based on this sidereal calendar, a sidereal system, which means it has as point of reference these stars that don't move like the seasons, or like the precession of the equinoxes has moved all the signs. So that's why Vedic astrology is so reliable and accurate. It's a science, that's what Dr. Pillai calls it, because the stars don't move. They haven't moved significantly for thousands of years. So imagine right now, Saturn is in this nakshatra, in this constellation of the sun called Uttara Shada. And from here, it will have a totally different impact than when he will be in, say, in Shravana, which is ruled by the moon. So here we have a placement of the sun kind of energy, because it's the Vishvadevas, and so this nakshatra is being blessed by millions of gods, according to the Indian tradition. So having Saturn in this very auspicious place will mean a lot of good for the world in terms of prosperity, etc. So if you've done your work, and there's no doubt that Saturn wants you to do your work, then you will receive a lot of fruits from this placement of Saturn in Uttara Shada. And these constellations go from this constellation goes from Sagittarius to Capricorn. I hope this is not too complicated, but there is a constellation, so several stars, and Saturn is moving between signs from Sagittarius to Capricorn, and it stays in this constellation in both, so from both in Sagittarius and Capricorn. And it's a little different. But what's amazing about Uttarashada is that Saturn there can bring a lot of achievement and even fame. If you have done your work and you are in a position to receive the benefits, because this nakshatra includes what's called Abhijit. Abhijit is the 28th nakshatra that we're not using anymore, but it means victory, it means incredible achievement, it means the best kind of work that you can do in your lifetime. So you can also get ready and just take your projects out of your drawers and know that if you do your hard work and you do the remedies, now you will get amazing results. So this is a transit. It means that the planet is moving between signs, those constellations, but also in the bigger picture throughout the constellation of Uttarashada. I don't remember the astronomical name that we use, the Latin name for Uttarashada. Maybe Nina knows. So you can look it up at AstroVed. They're very good at showing both names.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So
basically, in layman's terms, the transit is when a planet is moving from one sign to the next, and that's seen in the zodiac And each sign is related to a house. Now you correct me if I'm wrong. And each house is an indicator of the different areas of our life, right? So that's how the specific impact comes into us. So where is Capricorn in your chart? Which house is it from your ascendant or from your moon, right?
Right.
That's
So
how
it
we
can
get
be
to-
anything for any given person. It can be their moon, or it can be their first house, or their house of finances, the second and family, or it can be the fourth house of home, mother, assets, and happiness, or it can be the 10th, which is career and achievements. It can be just about anything. For some people, it's children, but even there, it will show maybe that the children will achieve more if Saturn is pacified through remedies, or if it's a good planet for that person. So everything is going to be stirred up for everyone. Okay, so this transit is significant for everyone on the Earth plane, including pets. Saturn rules pets.
Oh, wow.
Yes, in geographical areas connected with Saturn. So it's a very important transit.
Okay, great. And then Asteroid was talking about this transit happening only once in, what is it, 30 years or
Every 30 years, yes, but a little less.
Well, tell us a little bit more about this specific, if you haven't already, is like this specific nature of this particular transit.
If you're young and you've never experienced it, it depends, because some nakshatras are ruled by Saturn. So at birth, the person will experience the 20 years of Saturn. So Saturn hasn't spared them. Saturn has brought a lot of maturity to those kids born in the nakshatra of Saturn. So there's a lot to be said. And it's like a microscope. You can go deeper and deeper. You can even reach, I like to say, the particle level, because Saturn encompasses so much in our consciousness. So even if you've never experienced Saturn in Capricorn, you've had the experience of Saturn somewhere in your chart. Does that explain?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So folks, I'm encouraging you to post questions in the chat on the viewing page. I can grab those once we go through, are finished with our presentation, we'll answer those. Mina, what's your take on this particular transit, why it's different, any advice based on your experiences with Saturn so far in terms of approaching this next 2.5 years?
Well, I have to say, Lolita, I found that so encouraging, what I just heard, that it's a good transit coming up. And it reminded me, I did have a reading years ago, and this astrologer pointed to this period as a very favorable time. So he was telling me personally some things, but I see that I would really I would look at projects that either have been put aside or that you've been considering starting. It just seems like this would be a period where you could make great progress. I've always known Capricorn is the business side. I've always known that sign, but the fact that Saturn is transiting there, it's really a perfect time to buckle down and do that hard work for the results that you want. So that would be my take on this transit.
Cool. So I'm learning so much from both of you. So it sounds like it's a really good time to leverage the benefits of Saturn. Like, he wants us to do the work. And if you do your part in this period of time, this 2.5 years, he's going to be able to actually bless more. Yeah. Right? Okay, I see Lolita's nodding, so I'm getting a good sign there. Great. So this is really good news for everyone. And we have some questions. So I actually want to get to those before we get to the remedy section, just because there's questions about transits and what it means. So we've heard both of you mention different ways in which Saturn can impact us. It can be the 19 years, or I think it's 19 years, right? And that's called the dasa, correct? And so that's a very long period of time. And Dr. Ply calls that the planet that's influencing you the most. In fact, Astroved has a free report if you want to know what that is for you. And it's called your Planetary Influence Report. You can go to Astroved and put in your birth information and get that report so that you know what Dasa and Bhukti, major and minor period, you're in right now. When we're in these major and minor periods ruled by particular planets, they're having the most impact on us at this moment. So think of these planets as characters, and they all in archetypes, and they all have different characteristics. And when they're kind of in the room with you for 19 years, they're going to have an impact. Like if you're hanging out with some, like your friend or your mother-in-law or whoever it is for 19 years, they're going to start impacting the way you think, how you think about yourself. Maybe it's your mother-in-law and now you're getting self-conscious, right? Like these beings are literally beings. So imagine this person in the room with you for 19 years. There's an exchange. And then there's this other person who's in the room with you, but these are cycling in and out faster. And that's your main person is your Dasa, and your secondary person is your Bhukti, and that's the minor period. And maybe that person comes in and out. So they'll sit there with you for several years, and they will also have an impact, but not quite as the constant presence that's here for a longer period of time. So that's one thing, this 19-year period, or we call it the Dasa or Mahadasa. And then there's Bhuktis, which is the minor period, which I just mentioned. There's also the 7 years of Saturn. So I like for Lalita, help us understand what this 7 years of Saturn means, what we can expect. It's happening to lots of people. People are moving into it with this transit. People are moving out of it with this transit. People are in the middle of it with this transit. How do we know if we're in the 7 years or going to be entering the 7 years? And what can we expect?
Oh boy. So there's a great book. I forget the name, but it explains what Saturn can do. There was a king who was very defiant and proud. And Saturn told him, well, don't be so proud because I'm going to enter your 12th house. So wherever the moon is in your birth chart, when Saturn enters the 12th house, that's the beginning of the Sadesati, the 7.5 years. So Saturn told him, I'm going to trouble you unless you bow to me and you respect me, you're going to be in trouble. And the king started to laugh, and of course he ignored him, and he lived to regret it because throughout the Sadesati, he lost his limbs, he lost his kingdom, he kind of got lost, and people didn't recognize him as king and didn't believe him, and he started to work as a laborer without the legs, or without both legs. I mean, the most atrocious things happened to him, but because he became very kind, very giving, and very humble, Saturn rewarded him at the end of this Sadesati. He got his kingdom back, he married, his legs grew back. It's that dramatic, the change. And he was able to marry the princess, the daughter of this great king, who became, came to like him and think he was a great guy. So he got everything back. So don't get scared because nothing that dramatic ever happens for most people. But definitely there will be a change because Saturn in the 12th house can bring losses of money, as Lakshmi said. And it can be maybe the loss of a job, temporary, maybe you find another one, but generally it brings some kind of shake-up. Then there's the house of the moon. So imagine that you have Saturn, this elderly person who's looking at you like this and telling you, you cannot play yet. You have to do all these chores. You have tasks, you have duties and responsibilities. Those people won't eat if you leave the house and don't cook. Okay, so you cannot ignore Saturn. As you said, he's in the room. What are you going to do? He's on your mind. So that would be usually a time of stress. And Sagittarius have been going through Sadesati with Saturn in their on their moon. It's been very dramatic, and it's about to change. So that's to give you an example. And then Saturn enters the second house from the moon, which is finances, it's family. So maybe a family member is not feeling so well that you will need to take care, or maybe finances the assets. Some people lose their assets. I don't know, or some money, some kind of thing. Assets will be the fourth house, but in general, as we've seen, the fourth house from where Saturn is also can be affected. So there's a lot going on, and you want to have a Vedic astrology consultation. And I recommend that to anybody. Even if you had one last month, I believe that you should look a little deeper, because Saturn is also one of the planets that influences, that causes that dosha, that blemish called Pitru dosha. Pitru dosha means the ancestors. So when Saturn is in certain placements, is also giving you this. I don't want to use the the usual term they use in India. It's too dramatic, but it causes some problem with the ancestors that you're not receiving their blessings, and that is fundamental, because even Dr. Pillai tells us all the time: if you do one thing, do your tarpanam and pacify your ancestors, and then everything happens and you can have the blessings. So imagine Saturn can also cause that. So look deeper, go look at the DNA level, look at the particle level, look at the astrological level. So take care, and you'll be happier you did. I'm not saying that because I'm a Vedic astrologer, but I really, really believe in it. I've seen it at work.
Yeah.
Okay, I usually don't say things, but when my Saturn entered my 8th house, immediately within days, I lost my inheritance for various reasons. So it is a big thing, right? It was a couple of $1 million. For me, it was a lot of money. For most people, it is a lot of money. So I'm not saying it happens to everyone. For example, Gemini is about to start the Shani Ashtama, which means Saturn in the 8th house. It will not be as bad for Gemini because, the Mercury is a friend of Saturn, but still it is a significant placement. So take care, have a Vedic astrology consultation and do the remedies. And I know Pillai Center is selling something like that. You can order it, and also Astrobed.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to say that it's important.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for understanding that. And I've heard Dr. Pillai, a lot of students around Dr. Pillai have gone in and out of the 7 years, Sati Sati. And one of the things he has mentioned is that typically the middle 2.5 years, he says, will be like the toughest. So you're kind of moving into it in the first 2.5 years, getting used to the situation. The middle 2.5 years is really when the bottom drops out, like more intense situations occur. And then the last 2.5 years, he has said that that's actually when Saturn starts building you back up. And like we're talking about with this particular transit, where it's like, oh, if I do my work, then I'll be rewarded. That's how Saturn works. The last 2.5 years, if you've really kind of done your work, can really rise you up, and you can start getting benefits from there.
Yes,
and then of course,
absolutely. Right, absolutely. And I forgot to say what you just said, that the last portion of Sadesati, you start getting something back. Right. And especially if you're working hard and you're diligent, etc., and don't give up. So I like to remember Paramahansa Yogananda, who said, most people fail because they give up, otherwise they would have succeeded. Right. That's what Saturn teaches us. And so for example, Sagittarius, I'm not a Sagittarius, I just happen to know that Sagittarius suffered a lot with Saturn on the moon in Sagittarius. But now, as Saturn is strong in Capricorn, that wealth can be rebuilt, and if you lost your job, you'll find one, etc. So it's important to remember that. Thank you for mentioning it.
Cool, thank you. Yes, that's what Dr. Pillai often says to remember. So making sure you do remedies is really the thing for all of these. So Mina, since you've had experiences with both the 19 years and the 7 years, is there anything you'd like to add? Oops, you're muted.
Unmuted.
Okay, there you go.
I think it's kind of interesting. As Lolita was talking, I was thinking about it. During all of my intense Saturn years, that's when Dr. Pillai gave me several programs to manage, which were all for people afflicted by Saturn, which is the Hanuman Das program, the Karpaswamy program, and Kali. So all the dark, if you look at Kali is dark, Karpaswamy is dark, And then Hanuman has a special relationship with Saturn because he saved him from when he was being imprisoned and tortured by Ravana in the Ramayana, excuse me. So all of those, so I've worked, not only have I personally gone through quite a bit of Saturn corrections and lessons and everything, I've worked with so many people that are also going through their Saturn periods, and they all come out of it and with more of a groundedness, more humility. A lot of the people have come into quite a bit of wealth after the loss, and more so than what they had before. So it just makes you motivated to work, but in a very grounded way. And I know that's not answering your question, but the remedies, there's planetary remedies, but there's also the gods and goddesses that are very helpful during
Yeah.
this period.
Right. And we will get to the whole list of remedies. And what I'm hearing from both of you, I keep hearing humility, how humility is something that Saturn is teaching. And what my interpretation here is that humility is when we're not so much in our ego. And Dr. Pillai's quote is that the ego is that which separates you from God. So if your God self is being blocked by your ego, then here is Saturn helping to dissolve that ego, giving us the lessons that we personally need in order to release that. So our humility can shine, so that our connection to God can shine. And that's the purpose of our incarnation. Purpose of our incarnation is to evolve, is to become self-realized, is to become one with God. Dr. Pillai talks about that as like one of his core teachings, is that you become God realized, that you know who you are. Saturn is the agent of that. Saturn is helping us to actually get to that place. So folks, whatever the experiences may be, it's so important for us to remember that we are on this path, and Saturn is our friend in terms of like, hey, you said you wanted to incarnate to have like some high experiences, right? And we're like, yeah, okay, well, your big ego and your this and that over here is preventing you from that. So I'm going to have to destroy that. And you're like, really? Yeah, remember before you were born, you wanted to have this experience? Okay. And then Saturn comes in and destroys whatever it is that's blocking us from that higher experience, from being self-realized, from experiencing God. So in that sense, so much gratitude, and thank you, Mina, for kind of reminding us of that, like the gratitude that we should have towards Saturn, even though he can be a very tough teacher, but that's what teachers do. So let's get into let me see if there's any other questions around transits before we get into the remedies. Will the transit affect world economies? We'll get to that later. So hopefully we've answered your questions regarding the, kind of what transits are, how this one's going to be different, how it may or may not impact you. And then specifically, to get specific for you, because there's a lot of questions in here like, well, I'm a Capricorn, what does it mean? This is specific to you. So we can't get to all of those questions. What Lolita and all of us are recommending is that you get an astrology reading. Dr. Pillai very much into suggesting you get an astrology reading. You know what's in your chart. You know how this, specifically of this transit, how is it going to impact you? Like I said before, you want to know what your roadmap looks like. Oh, well, there's going to be some hills and bumps over this way. I could patch them up in advance by lighting the sesame lamp every Saturday. Or, this path's a little clearer. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll work on my career if this is good for me over the next 2.5 years. Maybe I'll put something else aside. I'm not, I'll lose in investing. Let's not invest. Knowing this, so valuable. I mean, it's so valuable. So spend the money to get the astrology reading. It's worth every penny. They get recorded. And bring questions. So if you want a reading just around the transit, then just tell your astrologer that's what you want. Bhakti can post the link for the live astrology consultations with Astrobed. Lalita's one of the astrologers on there. So if you want to have one with her or Swamini Bali or any of the Indian astrologers, one of my favorites over there is Vijaya Lakshmi. So you get, I think we have two Western folks, Lalita and Swamini Bali, and then the rest are Indian based. So the link is in there. And then the remedies that you can do at home, we're going to get to now. There's also remedies you can do by proxy, which we'll get to after this. But first, I want to make sure everyone gets what they need to do freely at home for this transit. That's why this is so important. Lalita mentioned earlier when we were talking how this particular day on the 24th, and I have the Astrobed calendar, it says at 1:40 a.m. Eastern time on the 24th of January is when the transit starts, and it really lasts like all day. So on the 24th, it's also a new moon, which Lalita mentioned we should be propitiating our ancestors. So super powerful day. You don't want to miss it. And this is what you should be doing. I'll run through a few of the high level things, and then we'll go into more detail, and Lalita and Mina can expand. So Saturn is associated with black. We're wearing black on a Saturday, or deep blue or deep purple, dark color, specifically black. If you can wear black on a Saturday, that's a good way to say, hey, I'm doing my part over here, right? So wearing black on Saturdays. Donating specifically to elderly on Saturdays helps with Saturn. Again, appeasing him. We want to do things that please him. So let's remember the scenario. You're in the room with your mother-in-law for 19 years or 7 years or whatever it looks like, and she's not going anywhere. But then you know that she likes, almond cookies. And you're like, well, I got these almond cookies for you. And she's like, oh, thank you, right? So for a minute, she's like, okay. That's what you want to do to Saturn. You want to give him the things that he appreciates. And as you're continuing to do that, guess what? You're building the relationship, just like your mother-in-law. Like, so then maybe she'll be a little bit open about something else. And then the end result is whatever Saturn is trying to teach you is still going to happen, but it may happen in a different way. And that's why we're doing these remedies. And like the example Mina gave this morning, you're dedicated and commitment and persistent with these, something will happen. Some opening will happen for you. Okay, so donating to charity, specifically to the elderly. Tripura Foundation now has a way that you can actually donate every particular weekday. Unfortunately, I think they don't include Saturdays, but they're getting that fixed. Or just go there yourself and make a donation on Saturdays. And we have an elderly program, which is even better. So donate to the elderly every Saturday. Lighting sesame lamps. Mina mentioned this earlier. Sesame oil, get a little ghee lamp, just put straight sesame oil in it and light it every Saturday. If you can do it at sunrise on Saturday, because that's when the Saturn Hora is on Saturdays, that's even better. Prayers to Hanuman, Mina mentioned. Tarpanam, ancestor offerings, Lalita mentioned. Feeding crows is a great way on Saturday specifically. Saturn's vehicle is a crow. So again, we're appealing to the things that he likes. Sesame seeds, Saturn likes sesame seeds. I know in India, it's pretty easy to get these little sesame seed sweets, and you can offer it to him. So those are some that I just ran through. We'll get into some more detail. Oh, and the mantra, the Saturn mantra. So Lalita, I'll go to both of you. So Lalita, anything you'd like to expand on, and can you please give us the mantra for Saturn?
Sure. The mantra we use all the time, I like to use the one that Dr. Pillai has given us to me 10 years ago, because most of you have been there longer. It's Om Shani Charaya Namaha. So it's Om Shani is Saturn, Shani Charaya Namaha. So we want to use that mantra because it's the easiest for us, but of course there are more mantras. You can also listen to the Hanuman Chalisa because it's very important on a Saturday. And the Saturn is always pleased when we honor Hanuman. as Mina said, it's so important. In the Ramayana, they taught us that Saturn was a prisoner, and Saturn was a prisoner, and unless we pray to Hanuman, Saturn will hurt us. But when we mention the name Hanuman, immediately Saturn will stop hurting us. It's that powerful. So do something for Hanuman. You can buy maybe a statue of Astrobite, or you can just download a picture and use that on your altar or a clean place, a clean table. And you can offer after offering the lamp and maybe you can put a few sesame seeds, black sesame seeds in the lamp, and Saturn is said to like that. And what else can I tell you? Offer dark, like black fruit, like blueberries, and maybe blue flowers, dark blue flowers, I think are available. Black I've never seen. I think we have dark purple and dark blue. And so Saturn is very happy when we do something for him and we honor him with much humility and sincerity. That's all. He knows when we lie. We have to be really sincere. And also, when I lived in India, I was mentioning to Lakshmi before, I made omelets. If you're not vegan and you can handle eggs, you can make a little omelet and offer it to crows. My crows keep coming here because they're used to the bread I give them every morning. And also, so we can make a omelette on a Saturday. I think that would be a very powerful step. And it's a traditional one too.
Definitely. Also, folks, Lalita mentioned the Hanuman Chalisa, which is the longer Hanuman chant. You can just play that on a Saturday. Also, Dr. Pillai has always said that the name of the archetype is also their mantra. So if you just want to say Om Hanumantaya Namaha or Om Hanuman Namaha, that's another way to just bring him into your life. So Hanuman also loves butter. You can offer him butter, bananas, put butter on his statue. Anything else, Lalita, that you want to add to our remedy list?
Yes, you can donate generously on Saturdays, black blankets, black clothing to homeless people or disabled, preferably men, but it doesn't have to be, of course. You can donate black umbrellas, black shoes, possibly all new items. That would be better. And so be very generous because we're here to evolve, as Lakshmi mentioned. And Saturn is the planet that most matures the soul. So the sun is the soul and Saturn is responsible for maturing us at the soul level. And that's how everything happens in our lives, spiritually and materially. So we want to have that 200% life. Without Saturn, we can't, because we won't have the maturity to achieve those spiritual goals or even the material goals. So I think Saturn is our friend, and they're supposed to be benevolent beings who do difficult things because we chose to before we were born. So it's our karma, and our karma can change because it's our opinions, it's our notions, it's our mindset.
Great. Thank you. Mina, what else would you add to our remedy list?
Well, you've done a really thorough job, I would say. The only thing that came to me while you're speaking is something that Dr. Pillai had told me to do years ago when he first looked at my chart and knew I had a lot of Saturn coming forward, is if you know anybody that's homebound, or if there are any local charities that take care of people who are homebound, those are Saturn's children. And inwardly, you can be saying his mantra, the mantra to Saturn and to Hanuman, and just say, Saturn, I'm taking care of your children, and do something like that.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you. And to that point, like Lalita mentioned and what Mina just said, sincerity is the most important ingredient. And Dr. Pillai has said, even if you say the mantra wrong, if you do it from your heart and with love, it gets to the being. And as Westerners, I tend to say things incorrectly, but it's really where you come from in the heart and connecting with this being and getting to know Saturn. I know there's also some books that people can read. The Greatness of Saturn is one of them. I understand you both recommend that. Then, do either of you want to mention anything else, like other ways to kind of connect, or books or recommendations?
Well, I want to mention what you just said, mythotherapy. That's what Dr. Pillai calls it. Any myth of Saturn, any myth of Hanuman, you may want to read the Ramayana, or at least some excerpts of that. It talks a lot about Hanuman and why it's so important for us. He protects us and he helps us to achieve the impossible, also by pacifying Saturn and by diffusing what the actions of Saturn. Because Saturn, like in the Jataka Parijata, I was a little surprised because it describes Saturn as doing dark things because he's dark. But those dark things are necessary. It's like you're about to go away for the weekend to have fun with your friends, and Saturn says, stop everything, cancel the trip. You have to do this for me right now. And that's a responsibility. That is commitment. So it may seem dark and uncomfortable, but it's actually good for us in the long run.
And that's a good example of we're not always sure what's good for us at the time of it happening because it may seem unpleasant. Exactly. But in retrospect, we're like, oh my gosh, good thing I didn't go on that trip with my friends. I would have gotten into an accident or had a fight or something like that.
Or lost a job.
Right. And that's how we have to look at Saturn's lessons. We're not maybe able to see the big picture right now. So let's trust in God, trust in Dr. Pillai's instructions, trust in Saturn, that things will unfold. What's really important, though, is to make sure you're doing these remedies. These are godsends. These are what makes a difference, instead of us just blindly going along with whatever's coming at us and then experiencing it and getting upset. These remedies put power back into our control, and in terms of being able to make a difference. Dr. Pillai says that the benefit of Vedic astrology isn't that you just hear what's going to happen to you, but that you can actually do something about it.
Exactly. That's why, sorry, I want to interrupt just for a second. And that's why Vedic astrology is superior. Of all the predictive methods, it's the only one that I know that comes with remedies. And we're so blessed to even know about it because we're Westerners and we didn't grow up in India knowing that feeding crows can help you with your job or getting a project completed and also rewarded. Right. So yeah, definitely.
Cool. Yes. So that's how that's our ultimate benefit, is connecting with Saturn, learning about him, mythotherapy, all of the remedies that we mentioned, and Saturn also loves for you to be consistent and persistent. And so we all get to take that on, right? Like with this transit. And I'm actually excited. This has helped me so much to understand better and to actually get excited about this transit in really doubling down on discipline for myself, putting some more of these practices into place. So I hope that it's helped all of you. Last thing I want to mention before we get to some questions is here's your at-home remedies. You can do them totally free or some little expense for you to purchase maybe some items. Black sesame seeds is something Saturn likes too. Now, on the other side is having professionals do them for you. Pillai Center and Astrovet have created a year-long program for Saturn, as well as something specific, packages specific to this particular transit, where there's going to be remedies and rituals done for you all day on the transit, and I believe maybe even afterwards. There's a link at the bottom of your viewing page. It says Saturn Transit Offerings. I invite you to go check that out. There's also the year-long, which Bhakti will pop that link in. And for the transit ones, it's actually it's a 35-month period of self-development and new initiatives. Oh, that's the that's the period of time that the transit is happening. So we have, let's see how many there are. There's a few different options down at the bottom. If you scroll down, there's different packages. There's the essential package for 57, the enhanced for 108, and the elite for 217. I'm going to go all in on things like this that are only once in a while, like once every 2.5 years. I usually go with the most kind of advanced, most comprehensive package because it doesn't happen so often. And then we really, lose that opportunity once it's gone because we're not seeing another transit for another 2.5 years. However, you can still continue to do remedies within that period of time, the 35 months. And that's what the year-long package is really good for too. I've personally done like 3 or 6 or 12 months of just Saturn remedies. And what I loved about that is like you just putting it on autopilot. You pay the fee, the professionals do it in India. They're going to temples for you. They're doing fire ceremonies. They're doing hydrations. They're doing chanting, all the things. They're making offerings that Saturn likes. They're doing donations on your behalf. All the things that we talked about today in terms of what Saturn loves. When you do these proxy remedies, it's getting done on your behalf. So what am I personally doing? I'm going to be doing what we mentioned very specifically on Friday, as well as purchasing this elite package. Do either one of you have anything to say about remedies and how that has actually changed and impact your experiences?
I mean, that's,
Oops, you go ahead, Mina.
yeah, I mean, I live my life by that. So I feel really, it to me, it seems when I see people suffer a whole lifetime and I think, my gosh, they could have saved themselves a lifetime of because suffering doesn't actually change karma. And I think that's an important thing to remember and know. Just because it is so much suffering doesn't mean that it goes away. You could come back in another life and continue that. But these remedies, these were given to us as they're a prescription. It's just like if you take an antibiotic, that that infection may not kill you, and you're spared from it. And that's what I see a remedy. It's so powerful, and it's really in comparison to what you would go through compared to the picture of remedy plus going through a rough transit and having no remedy. There's no comparison. There's not even, to me, it's a no-brainer because it's a gift from the divine, and to know these things and how few people do know it. And a lot of time, I mean, I'll see somebody in my family suffering from it, and I'll just run a remedy for them because maybe they don't believe it, but at least I know I can help them from afar. So yeah, that's what I would say about it.
Great, thank you. Lalita?
Same for me. I sign up for everything. As far as I can afford it, I'll do it. And especially for Saturn, I have ongoing remedies for me. And I think everybody should do at their level, that is comfortable, not getting to debt for that. But definitely sign up for the biggest package you can afford because it's so comprehensive, and there are so many archetypes that are ruling us. Like before, I mentioned the Vishva Devas in the nakshatra of Uttarashada, where Saturn will be for over a year. And 330 million gods bless the nakshatra. So imagine once you remove the obstacles, how much we can benefit from the divine energy that comes to us. I believe in the Vedas literally, and even in what I've read from the Vedic astrology books and what I've experienced in life with my family, myself, and my clients. It's literally true. We do the remedies and wonderful things can happen. And vice versa, when we don't, we are in a dark space in the mind, we make mistakes and we get in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I'll give a quick example because sometimes I do remedies and I don't always feel them. And sometimes I do remedies and it's like that night I did, and Mina mentioned sometimes doing it for family, and I did this. My brother was in a bad place, I mentioned, right? Like he's been through a lot. And then one year I just decided to do an individual fire ritual for him on a very powerful day for him. And literally like 2 days later, he's like, I got a new place. Like I've got my own place. I'm really excited. I have this job. And I was like, what? Like it just worked really, something worked really fast. No, his life still is complicated, but he's still in that place that it has been his only like independent living situation in his whole life. So cool things can happen for yourself and other people when these remedies happen for them, especially at the right time. Like when I did that, happened to be his birth star birthday. It was the most powerful time of the year. Like this window opens up, and same for this transit. Like this window is opening up, and it's on this day, and that's where you really want to jam pack your efforts because they'll have the longest effect, the best effect. Right? Dr. Ply always talks about doing the right thing at the right time. And this is, we're just telling you what to do what to do at the right time. So here you have it. So you have your at home and you have your done by professionals, recommended you do both. And like Lalita says, do what you can afford. Don't go into debt. But I always push the limits on these things that are, kind of happen less often, like yearly or every couple years, just to make sure we're kind of getting the most bang for our buck because it takes longer to come back around. Go ahead, Mina.
I'd love to add one thing that I know I started telling you about the friend who was so good about Saturn, and Saturn showed that I'm not going to touch you anymore. I'm done. I'm blessing you. The same person, the reason I originally met him is because he went to Astroved and ordered everything. And I mean, everything. So I called to make sure he was in his right mind. First of all, I was like, are you okay? I wanted to make sure there was. And then he explained what the problems were. And I said, why don't we just zero in on these issues? And that's going to be more effective. As you were saying, timing and to know exactly what you're doing. Otherwise, it was just blindness, and he was doing everything. So one could counteract the other, and you want an expert to actually look at your birth time, your birth chart, something very personal, and tell you this is where you're going to have the most impact if you do these remedies. So I just want to.
Perfect. Thank you.
Definitely guidance from an expert is so important. So coaching, Mina is a coach at Pillai Center. Also, an expert, an experienced Vedic astrologer can tell you what to do and what to expect and how to minimize the impact, because there will be some. It's not a magic wand that takes everything away, but definitely you will see the difference. When I do this for my children, I immediately see the blessings from the planet, from Ganesha. That's my favorite story. My son, I felt intuitively my son needed Ketu remedies, but he was in the Rahu Mahadasha, so didn't make any sense logically. And I ordered him on his Nakshatra day, just as you did for your brother. And the 2 days later, my son was playing the drums in a club, and 70-pound speaker, this huge, fell on his head. And that was Sunday. So Ganesha is the ruler of Ketu. And I believe that the miracle happened because he didn't even have a neck pain, a little bit sore. He didn't get hurt on his skull. It was a miracle. I consider it the biggest miracle from Ganesha that day. So Ketu and Ganesha together. So similarly for Saturn, I've had amazing results with my remedies, and for my children, other family members. Yeah. So really, we should do the remedies, though. I was going to say mostly for family members because it's a genetic lineage, so ancestors and descendants, but not so much for strangers unless you're prepared, for some karmic impact. Right. So yeah, we need to be generous and not think only of ourselves, but just be cautious. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. And so I'm going to look at some questions here in the chat. There are some specific questions, but like I said, folks, we're not going to get to the specific questions about your charts. That's where you to go to get an astrology reading so it can be comprehensive. There's a question about Saturn in the 8th house, and that was mentioned on this call. Can we just quickly say what that means? And even like Lolita, you had mentioned earlier, that when Saturn moves through different houses, that has a different impact because of the how the house symbolism of the house in our life.
Sorry, what's the question?
Question is significance of 8th house Saturn.
8th house Saturn. That is supposed to be one of the most difficult positions of Saturn. In my view, the most difficult, especially if Saturn is not a very positive planet in your birth chart. For example, for Taurus, for Libra, Saturn is a good planet, but for most people, really, it's not the best planet. And so Saturn in the 8th house of fear, house of sudden happenings, house of inheritance, house of banks, not always inheritance, but definitely other people's money, like banks, loans, etc. So Saturn can cause debt, it can cause loss of properties and sudden shocking events, okay, like God forbid that a dear person who departs and leaves the world. Mm-hmm. From his case, we're supposed to not fear Saturn in the 8th house, but it is scary because Saturn is a tamasic planet. So we always think through Saturn, how do we prevent problems? Because tamasic means kind of lethargic and confused. That's why Saturn is so slow and can cause lethargy, is not inclined, doesn't make us inclined to take action. That's why we need to be double disciplined. Mm-hmm. So it's not the best place.
Right,
so
right.
Definitely do remedies.
Yeah.
You sacrifice somewhere else, but you need the remedies.
Right, yeah. So coming back to remedies, people,
it goes down to that.
The name of the game here is remedies. Okay, question. So Shweta is asking, Saturn metal is iron. Practically, is there something we should do with that? Like cook with iron or put iron on our altar? Anyone know anything about that?
Yes, so Saturn is associated with iron. So stainless, if you want to honor Saturn in your own way, maybe you can eat with stainless steel silverware, even if you normally eat with silver. I don't know, maybe you won't do that. Again, talking about black, if Saturn is really a horrible planet for you, very malefic, so don't wear black. That's important to find out through your birth chart.
Oh, that's also important. There was a question here about wearing the stone of Saturn, which is blue sapphire, and I know Mina has a story about that. Like, don't do it if Saturn's not good in your chart.
People should never wear a blue sapphire because it's really a very serious step that needs to be decided with a Vedic astrologer and also with a Vedic gemologist to make sure it's the right kind of blue sapphire. And actually, I remember Astroved years ago, there was a nice blog that talked about this and said, put it under your pillow, even if it's good for you, test it, sleep on it, literally sleep on it, and see how you feel and how everything goes the next day. So yeah, just don't go ahead and spend the money for a blue sapphire unless you're really sure.
Yeah, and because
for that story,
you're bringing Saturn closer to you by so stones, folks. Each planet has a relationship to a different stone, and when you're wearing it, you're actually bringing more of that energy. So, example, I wear this red ruby because sun is good, my planet, but weak. So I want to create more sun. But if you like
strong and it's a benefic for you, you can wear it. I have a benefic Jupiter, so I can wear
right
blue.
So stones are attracting more of, right? So you don't want to attract more Saturn, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So you can strengthen your planet through that, but also you can get the benefits more, even if it's already strong. Why not?
Right.
We never have, too much divine
Right. Right. Be careful.
Benevolence, it's enough. It's fine. But you can also increase the good things.
Right.
Do we have time for that little story, Lakshmi?
Sure, I'll keep reading the notes and see what other questions we have.
I don't see the questions.
Oh, no, he was going to tell a story about the blue sapphire. I'll pull the questions.
Okay. So speaking of this blue sapphire, this person I know was advised to get this blue sapphire because they have this wonderful relationship with Krishna. And they said, well, in this case, it'll be for Krishna. He had the good fortune of seeing Dr. Pillai in India, and Dr. Pillai said, you would be a fool to get that blue sapphire. And this person offered it to Dr. Pillai. It was a $40,000 beautiful blue sapphire. And Dr. Pillai said, are you crazy? And he said, I wouldn't want that for anything in my life. So this man, and then he advised him, he said, you're in a position where you should go to the top astrologer in India. And this man has a 6-month waiting list, but with the blessings of Dr. Pillai, he ended up getting in 2 days later, just as before he was flying out of India. This astrologer said, you are so fortunate that your guru intervened, because your life would have completely blown up in 30 days and you would have been in jail. That's all there is to it. That's what Saturn had in store for you. So it was such an alluring stone. It was so beautiful. It was, he just couldn't, but his guru, he was tested and he passed the test, and the money was not as important. That was the story.
Thank you. Yeah, that's just tale of caution. There's a question here about doing remedies for family members. There's a question that says, do they have to do them, or can I do them? Isn't there karmic implications as there's no permission? I have done remedies, not myself doing at the hand of myself, but having paid for them. And it's not the ideal situation. Ideally, those people should pay for it themselves. That's the cleanest karmic exchange. However, if you are feeling like there's a lot going on for this person and you want to make a contribution, I'm very careful now about what I'll do and what I won't do, because you don't want to take on the karma of those people, even if they're your family. So you definitely have to be careful, ideally, and don't do personally don't do remedies for somebody else, because now there's no karmic buffer. At least when the professionals do it and you're paying for that, then that karma exchange is happening over there, even though you've paid. So there is some of your karma, going into it. It does get messy, folks. Best case scenario, they do it for themselves. You do it for yourselves. Definitely don't do it at home for somebody else. And if you're really feeling compassionate or just really, really driven, like Lalita was, had an intuition to do it for somebody, you can, but don't go overboard. Don't be spending all your money on remedies for other people. You're getting too wrapped up in their karma.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
With what they can do, because in the programs that I'm in, there's oftentimes a real need for the remedy and the person could not afford it. What they'll do is they'll say, put in $20, or, they'll have them put something in, because that's the karmic part of it, and then cover the rest. So
Right.
That's always something you can consider.
Right.
And yes, and one of the things I learned from Dr. Pillai Babaji was that we should do remedies for our children, even other family members. So be cautious. Do something to help them. Maybe you can give them money and support them emotionally, but remedies are a serious thing. So definitely have a third party, like by proxy. Remedies are the best. However, I personally burn the incense of my children on their nakshatra day, and I feel like doing that, but you don't have to.
Okay.
Spouses and children are fine, because you're taking their karma. You're karmically connected.
Mm-hmm.
Those are definitely the relationships that it's not a problem.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you both. Okay, question from Sherry. If we offer to Saturn, aren't you bringing more Saturn energy into your life? Like bring Saturn closer to me by doing these rituals. And do we really want to bring Saturn closer to us?
Okay, so you're not bringing Saturn closer to you. You're actually having a better relationship with Saturn. Say, for example, you made a mistake and you accidentally offended someone. By apologizing sincerely and bringing flowers, etc., that person will be, even though they may not forgive you because they're stubborn, they have a big ego, but they still, they'll be a little nicer. They won't really curse or hate you or something. So similarly, when you pacify a planet, the planet will have a better effect for you, and Saturn will not hurt you, or at least you will not perceive the hurt. You feel better. In the same situation, two different people will react differently. Like Babaji said, some people are people literally have brains that repel negativity. They don't feel so much suffering as others, that they will see a situation as an opportunity even when it's a loss. Similarly, after you do the remedy, you will see the bright side of a situation and you'll take action in a better way. So this is helpful.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. Hope that Sherry and Sweta, I hope both of you have your questions answered. Anything else? Question about remedies for parents. Is that cool? I don't mean to mention spouses and children. What about parents?
I've always done it for my parents.
Okay. Parents are a go.
Can I mention one thing more about the personification of the planets? We've been talking about Saturn in a very personal way. And I think that's very helpful. And I did have an experience just in the very beginning. I met Dr. Pillai 20 years ago, and it was about 20 years ago that I had this experience. And Saturn did wake me up in the middle of the night. And Saturn was talking to me and showing me everything that was going to happen. And it had the same energy as the story in The Greatness of Saturn. It was, I recognized that energy. It was, so yes, it's a personification. And even though it's this big planet way out there, there is a being. And I think the more we relate to the personification, it's more accurate for us.
Yes, and Babaji also, Dr. Pillai also says, is a being. He has a three-dimensional form, and so he has also an anthropomorphic form. It's not just energy. They're actually divine beings. So they are real. You can relate to them and really trust that they're. The ancient sages could see reality much better than we can, because we're really confused. Our attention, we get easily distracted, but the ancient sages were able to actually see them. And you did too, right? So in a dream or have a vision with your eyes closed, you can actually see them.
Or they even come through in people. For instance, it was a naughty astrologer. I don't want to get too off base, but after I had that personification, when Saturn came and talked to me, Dr. Pillai actually called me the next day. I was shocked. And he said, Saturn wants to break your legs. And I said, actually, he told me that last night. Yes, I'm very aware of it. And then he had me come to India. I came to India, and he had me meet up with this naughty astrologer. And he said, you're going to get his blessings. And so I went there, and he gave me a whole plan for this. This man was completely crippled all over, and he had a blue aura. He was beautiful. Your heart just went out to him. He was gorgeous actually, but he was completely crippled, his everything. And he did bless me. I won't go into the details of the plan, but that was Saturn in the body.
Wow.
Now that you mentioned it, I did meet someone like that. It was a man who was in India, didn't have the legs, and he was standing on a little trawler, and he would just move himself with the arms. And he was really a beautiful person, a beautiful big smile. So yeah, you're right, something like that. But I was not in a Saturn period as far as I knew. But I definitely felt so much compassion for this person. So every time we're compassionate, also we are pacifying Saturn. That's good to remember. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Right, Charity. Thank you for that. Thank you for the personification really helping us hit home. And again, it's that heart connection that makes everything work. And so when Saturn appears to you in these beings, it's a way of connecting. So we have a couple more questions. The question about wearing black. So we mentioned that as a remedy. Is that something? And then I think it was Lalita said not to do it during certain periods. Like, so in your 7 years, can you reiterate what that was? When to wear black, when not to wear black, in terms of appeasing Saturn and as a remedy?
Well, okay, yes. So if you're having a bad Saturn transit, don't increase that energy in your life. So maybe you don't need, you can wear the color of a planet that is more benefic. Benefic in Vedic astrology means beneficial, of course, and benevolent towards you. You can test it. So on a Saturday, try wearing black and see what happens, right? So if you feel positive and you feel that you're doing fine, so continue. And if you one day you say, oh my God, everything is going wrong, let me change color, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. We have another question about, where are we? The Saturn, is 8 associated with Saturn, the number 8?
Yes, definitely. That's Saturn's number. And it is a number that is also in 108. So it is a significant number. It is auspicious if Saturn is not troubling you, but I wouldn't use it deliberately for, on purpose. But definitely.
But there's an association. Yeah, I think that was the question.
Yes.
And then I'm going to get through a few more questions. Another one on YouTube that says, so when we do Tarpanum, the ancestors bless only us or our whole family. My understanding is it's the whole family. So Tarpanum helps all of you. There's a question, how does the moon sign affect the transit?
Yeah, that's very important because we look at the ascendant, we look at the moon. Primarily the moon for transits, I believe, because they're more emotional. And the way you perceive something, that's what stands for you, right? So from the ascendant is the actual transit, we say, and from the moon, it's the way you perceive it and feel about it. So from the moon, it has more impact, like Saturn transiting the 8th house from the moon, I find it much more destructive than the other way around. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it is. It's very important. So Michaeline had that question. What else, folks? Go ahead, post your questions. We're going to be wrapping it up. Does Sati Sate speed up your karma? So in 7 years, you burn off how many years? Not really work that way. Do either one of you have?
I don't think that suffering, as Mina said, can remove karma. So right. You want to avoid.
Dr. Pillai says that too. He's like, suffering doesn't make your karma go away.
Right. So sadhasati is necessary to go through it because we can't avoid it, but we can do a lot of good things. We can become more compassionate and charitable, and also do the remedies. And Saturn will not hurt you just for the sake of it. You will have a karma, but it can be diffused and reduced and even nullified if you're very lucky.
Okay. There's a, let's see. Any words to our friends who are moving into the 19 years or 7 years? Because there's a couple of people who are like, this is happening.
Get an astrologer and get the remedies.
Yeah, good. Yeah, go to an astrologer and find out really what this means for you. Because I think Dr. Pillai actually said it was George Bush Jr. who was elected as president because of Saturn. So Saturn's not all bad. Saturn can lift you up. So consult an astrologer.
Most presidents during their Saturn period, they became presidents. So Saturn brings responsibility and also achievement. So which is both, right? So a president is the chief of the army, is a kshatriya, and is also a laborer. He's serving his people. So it's not all as fun as it looks, maybe. I've never been president, but I can't imagine it being just a walk in the park. It's got to be tough.
Right.
So yeah, you get everything, but it never feels like, oh yeah, it's my birthday party. So yeah, so you achieve things, but there will be some seriousness about it. Hopefully that helps. Yeah.
Great. Yes, thank you. Any other questions, folks? We're gonna wrap it up. Let me check YouTube. Okay, I think we covered everything. You should be fully equipped now to move into the Saturn transit, and specifically things to do this Friday. Hey, if you don't do anything else, make sure you're doing your remedies. Oh, one more question. The difference between the transit remedies and the year-long ultimate Saturn transit remedies. The year-long is more for you're in one of these periods where it's the 7 years, the 19 years, or you're kind of in it for the long haul and Saturn's on you, or maybe in your 8th house. That's where you want to do this year-long program because it's ongoing remedies on your behalf. The transit is different because it's very specific to this particular day, and making sure that we're covering all these bases around Saturn for the remedies that we mentioned. Chanting, donating, fire rituals, puja offerings at different temples around India. All of that is getting done on this day, or probably, I don't know if it's only on the day or if it goes after as well. But if you could actually do both, because they don't overlap. I just looked real quickly and it doesn't look like they overlap. But again, the year long is for like long haul. You're moving into your 19 years or your 7 years. That's something you probably want to keep doing every year. And then your transit is very specific to this transit. So that's the answer to that. There's a person here saying they didn't gain any real good information from a Saturn report, and they would recommend getting the reading. I agree as well. So I want to thank all of you for coming and learning about Saturn. We've hopefully made him happy. And thank you, Lalita and Mina, for lending your wisdom, your information, your personalities here today. We really appreciate that. And let's move really powerfully into this new transit that's happening in just a few days. So let us know if you have any questions. You can write to office@pilaicenter.com. The links for the remedy packages are there, as well as all the information you need to get started for your at-home practices. Another good thing to do is to download the Hora Watch app, where you can actually hear in Dr. Pillai's voice the Saturn chant when Saturn Hora comes along. So have a wonderful week, and thank you for being here. We'll talk to you soon. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you.